Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Hi there, welcome back. Another edition of Ask a Lawyer is here. Good to have you along. Look, if you're not sure what your workplace rights are, this is a show for you where we shatter the myths and misconceptions about employment law and employment law rights, which are actually really robust. But if you don't know about them, if you haven't been educated and not aware of what they are, it's hard to take advantage, right? So that's why we're glad to have you along for the next 30 minutes. I can guarantee you one thing, you're going to learn a lot. That is for sure. Welcome, John Scholes, your host, and alongside with me momentarily, my good pal and longtime employment lawyer and friend, Lior Samfiru from EmploymentLawyer.ca. He's going to be answering all of your questions over the next half hour and educating you as well as to your employment law rights. You want to reach out anytime when the show's not on, of course. Phone number first, 1-888-861-4555. You prefer email, that is ask@employmentlawyer.ca. I want to make you aware as well, a little later on in the show, our main topic will be dealing with workplace harassment. Yes, this is still a thing you have to deal with in 2022, so stick around for that. We're going to get to it. But Lior, I want to start off, as we always do, as you like to say, warm people up, exercise those employment law muscles with a matter you've been dealing with recently at the firm, pal. What do you got?
Hey, John, I don't think you'd be surprised to know that things can keep being quite busy in my office. I still get a lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of questions about workplace rights. People need to know they're starting to understand that there are rights that you have when it comes to employment law, when it comes to your job, when it comes to your workplace situation. And it always is a good place to start by asking a question. You're not going to know what you're owed. You're not going to know what your rights are unless you're asking a question. And, over the last week, I've been dealing with many people who have had their jobs change. They wanted to know, can my employer do that? Can they ask me to do more things? Can they take away responsibilities? Do they have to pay me more? I feel those questions and many others all the time. So on this show, we'll cover some of the main topics that come across my desk every single week. By doing that, we'll help you understand what to do if you're ever in that situation. Maybe your boss is not treating you properly. Maybe you're worried that you're going to lose your job or you have lost your job. What are you owed? Can you even lose that job? We'll cover all that. And of course, if you ever want to contact me directly so I can roll up my sleeves and get to work, you can always do that. We'll give you that contact information throughout the show. But now that we know what we're here to do, let's go ahead and do it. Let me tell you about a situation that came across my desk over the past week. I spoke with a gentleman who recently was diagnosed with some mental health issues, and he spoke to his doctor, and his doctor said it's absolutely a must that you take time off work to get better, to get some treatment so that you can come back to work in a normal state. So he gave this individual a doctor's note, and that doctor's note said he needs to be off for the next 60 days, 2 months. The employee goes, gives that doctor's note to his employer. Employer reviews it, and the next day says, yeah, we don't think that's enough. Here's what we need. We need you to see another independent doctor for that doctor to examine you, and that doctor can then tell us if, in fact, you do need time off work. So this person, of course, was upset. He didn't necessarily want his employer to know what his condition is. So he called me, he did the right thing, and he called me and he asked me, well, do I have to see this other doctor? Now, we've talked before on the show about this. And the answer is no, absolutely not. Your employer cannot demand that you see another doctor. Your employer cannot do anything other than listen to your doctor. So if your doctor says you need to be off work, it ends there. Your employer can't question that, can't insist that you see someone else, can't ignore it. They have to do what your doctor says. So no, there is no requirement that this person or any person sees another doctor that their employer wants them to see. And if their employer won't give them that time off because they don't trust the doctor, well, that could be a human rights violation, that could be a wrongful dismissal, you name it, it's illegal. So get that doctor's note, okay? If your employer has a follow-up question for your doctor, they may be able to ask that, but what they can't do and say that's not good or we want you to see another doctor. If you find yourself in that situation, unfortunately I know that people do, You call me and let me deal with it.
Well, you've said on many shows in the past, on our radio show, which I'll give you details about in a minute, Lior, it's a matter of prognosis versus diagnosis. There's one road they can't go down, correct?
Yeah, so an employer often wants to know more. Well, we want to know what your medical condition actually is, what the diagnosis is, what medication, what treatment you're getting. Offside, none of that is information that your employer is able to insist on. Now, your employer can find out or ask questions about your prognosis. You know, what kind of timeline are we looking at? Is there accommodation that you need? But they don't have the right to get that personal, private information. That's over the limit and certainly offside.
Again, as I just mentioned, Lior and I have done a radio show together for coming up on 10 years. We're all across the country. You can catch it, by the way, Sundays, 1 p.m. on News Talk 1010. You can join us for that. On the radio show, we get a lot of great phone calls. Lior, I want to get to one of the phone calls now, play it back, and talk about it a bit. Here we go.
I was teaching at my last school for 8 years. It's a private school. I got my contract renewed as per usual. And then the day after the students graduated from school, I was hauled into the office and told they had decided to take this department in a different direction and were thereby terminating my contract. I got 8 weeks termination package. And so here I am, 45 years old, almost finished my doctorate. There's nobody that is going to hire me with all those credentials. I'm at the top of the pay scale.
The old week per year, huh?
The old week per year. And by the way, this person said she's in a private school. I often see this in private school where the teachers, the instructors sign a new contract every year. Well, let's be clear on that. If you sign a contract every year, it becomes meaningless. Once you go beyond 3 contracts, the law considers you to be an indefinite employee. That contract that you sign becomes meaningless. So the real question for this person after 8 years as a teacher in a private school, does she get more than the 8 weeks that was paid to her? Well, of course she does. I know that our regular viewers know this, but let me show you how you can find out how much this person is owed, how much you're owed as well. I'm going to go and use our severance calculator tool, which you can find at PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. I'm going to plug this information to the severance calculator, and let's see what we get. You can see that on the screen right now. So we know this person is a private school teacher, been there for 8 years, 45 years of age. Her company or her school says, we're going to pay you 8 weeks severance. Except you see on the screen, she's owed anywhere from 12 to 14 months, not weeks, months of severance. Now, depending on her salary, obviously we're talking about tens and tens of thousands of dollars, if not more than that. So over a year severance instead of 8 weeks severance. By the way, John, common situation, what I've just shown you here. Most people, when they're let go, are owed a lot more than what they've been offered or what they've been paid. That's why the severance calculator is so useful. Again, PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca.
You bet. We'll take a short break now, Lior, and when we come back, employment lawyer Lior Samfiru will discuss workplace harassment. Stick around for that. It's on the way. Don't go anywhere.
Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
All right, thank you so much for sticking with us. Thank you and welcome back to Ask a Lawyer. John Scholes here, and to reach out to employment lawyer Lior Samfiru anytime, the number first, 1-888-861-4555, ask@employmentlawyer.ca. I want to get into this, our topic for the day, Lior, as mentioned, dealing with workplace harassment. First question is from a legal standpoint, what's considered workplace harassment? And maybe throw out an example or two, yeah?
Yeah, so unfortunately, John, workplace harassment is something that is becoming more widespread. At least people now are starting to understand that workplace harassment is not something you should just put up with. It's not okay, and an employer should certainly take this seriously. Now, workplace harassment is the type of conduct that would be considered unwelcome in the workplace. It's a very broad term, and it refers to any type of behavior that, viewed objectively, would be considered inappropriate and out of place in the workplace. So it can be anywhere from using inappropriate language within the context of the workplace to singling out someone and treating them differently. That's the type of harassment that sometimes we refer to as discrimination. To literally putting someone down and berating them. Those are all examples of workplace harassment, and they're all illegal. So if you're dealing with conduct that you know is out of place, you know is inappropriate, you know is not there properly to be in that workplace, that's exactly what workplace harassment is.
From the employer standpoint, do they have an obligation to prevent the harassment, and how do they meet those obligations if they do?
Not only does an employer have a moral obligation, an employer also has a legal obligation to deal with workplace harassment. That means an employer has to investigate workplace harassment if it's brought up to their attention, and ultimately do whatever they can to rectify it, to make sure it goes away. So an employer has to take it seriously. If the employer finds out about workplace harassment, they can't ignore it. They can't say, well, you know, boys will be boys. Gone are those days. They investigate, even if it means bringing in an outside investigator. And of course, ultimately, if harassment is found, they may have to penalize someone, provide training, remove someone from the workplace, ultimately make sure that that harassment goes away.
We're talking about dealing with workplace harassment. Third question for Lior. If someone has been subjected to workplace harassment, what's the first steps? What do they do?
Well, first thing you want to think about is, do you have a way to prove that harassment? Because you can always assume that the person that's harassing you is not going to admit it. Yeah. So how do we prove that? Is there a recording? So you can record someone talking inappropriately to you. Do you have emails? Do you have a witness? If you don't have anything in writing, create that written record. You know, maybe write to the person that's harassing you and say, today you said this to me and I didn't appreciate that. Create that record. Once you have the ability to prove that harassment, you want to tell your employer about it and give them an opportunity to meet that legal obligation. Do that in writing, tell them what's happening, tell them exactly what you want them to do, give them as many specifics and as facts as possible, and once you do that, that legal obligation is triggered and your employer must take it seriously.
Should that employee be concerned about being punished for complaining about the harassment? That's realistic, right?
Well, employees often tell me, I'm worried that something bad's going to happen to me if I complain about harassment. Well, let's be very clear. It is completely illegal to punish an employee because they complain about harassment. You're protected. You're not able to be punished. An employer cannot do that. We call that a reprisal. So you should always feel comfortable advocating for yourself and telling your employer about that harassment.
Now, what does that employer do? Final question for Lior. If the employer does nothing about it, maybe the person they're supposed to report to is the one that's doing the harassing. Then what happens?
So the first thing, as I said, you deal with it or try to deal with it internally. You give the company the opportunity to respond, to investigate, and to rectify that. If you've tried and nothing's happened, or maybe you're just not able to do that because there's no one there to speak to, that's when we deal with it externally. That's when I come in and my team, we can either get you out of there or force your employer to deal with that. So you deal with it internally if possible, and if that works, amazing, problem solved. If you can't or it doesn't solve the problem, I get involved. But either way, you shouldn't accept harassment. Don't just assume that there's nothing that you can do. The law on this, believe me, is on your side.
Again, as mentioned before, our longtime radio show happens on News Talk 1010 Sundays at 1 p.m. Second phone call from the day, Lior, is coming up right now.
I'm an employer, and I have a long-term employee who's at one location, and I want this person to move to another location. I'm not sure if she will go. If she doesn't, can it be construed as constructive dismissal?
So, yeah, it's a question that we often hear also from employees. My employer wants me to relocate. Do I have to? So the answer is, it depends on the effect that the move is going to have on the employee. So this person wants to relocate their employee. If that move is less than an hour commute more than they had before, so let's say before they had a 10-minute commute. If it's now an hour and 10 minutes commute, so it's an extra hour, yeah, that could absolutely be a constructive dismissal if the employee doesn't want to do it. It's a big deal, an extra hour. But if the extra commute to work is less than an hour, if that employee chooses not to move, well, it's not a constructive dismissal. It'd simply be a resignation. So the key issue when it comes to relocation is not the distance that the employer wants you to move, right? It's how it's going to impact you. So that hour threshold is an important one. More than an hour, yeah, potentially constructive dismissal. Less than an hour, probably okay.
If you want to reach out anytime to Lior and his amazing crew, you can do so. First, I'll give you the phone number, 1-888-861-4555. Email ask@EmploymentLawyer.ca or simply EmploymentLawyer.ca, the website as well. When we come back, we're going to be dealing with terminated because you're not deemed totally disabled by the insurance company and being forced into retirement. That is on the way. Stick around.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
All right, welcome back to Ask a Lawyer. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. To reach out to employment lawyer Lior Samfiru anytime, 1-888-861-4555. Email ask@employmentlawyer.ca. And as I mentioned before, Lior and I have for a very long time been doing an hour-long radio show. You can catch that Sundays, 1 p.m. on News Talk 1010. Get a lot of phone calls on the show. We play them back here and we dissect them, we discuss them. We'll get to our third call for the show right now. Lior, stand by.
I'm an injured worker, and 3 years ago I had some procedures on my back. During that time that I was off for my back, I was told that I didn't meet the requirements for permanent disability or disability benefits anymore. So they cut my benefits off and told me I had to show up for work or I would be terminated from employment.
Wow.
Yeah.
John, there's two issues here. One is the fact that he was cut off disability coverage. The other is that the employer is telling him, you better come into work or else. All the while, of course, he's unable to work. Now, the answer to both of those issues is that your doctor wins the day here. And what I mean by that is if your doctor says you're disabled, you cannot work now, that means your insurance company cannot cut you off and should not cut you off. And of course, it also means that your employer cannot tell you to come to work because your doctor says you can't. So we have an issue with both of those fronts. Now, with respect to your employer, all that you do is you provide that doctor, so they can't do anything. If they try to do anything to you, that's a human rights violation, that's a wrongful dismissal, completely illegal. Same thing with respect to the insurance company. We have a whole team at the office whose sole job is to make sure that people stay on disability coverage or get compensated if they've been cut off. So either way, we can help in that situation. It does happen more often than you realize. Ultimately, remember what I said, your doctor, your family doctor, your specialist, the doctor that you see has all the power. So make sure you get that doctor's note.
Lior, I want to get to a question that the firm was asked recently. I'm going to read this out to you and we can get into it. It says, I was cut loose from a sales position with a family-run business. I worked for the past 32 years. The termination note from the owner says I'll get 26 weeks pay as a retirement gift. I'm 71. Should I ask him to throw in a few more weeks?
Wow. Let's take a step back before we ask that, because first of all, let's be clear. There's no such thing as mandatory retirement. Right. You can't be told to retire. You can work as long as you want till whatever age you want. So right off the bat, there's no such thing as a retirement gift unless you've decided to retire. This is a termination, and if the termination is motivated by the person's age, it's also a human rights violation. But even if we put that aside for a second, the real question becomes, what severance, how much severance should this person be getting after all these years, over 32 years of employment? Spoiler alert, it's more than 26 weeks pay. So let's take this information, let's find out how much severance the person is owed. Let's go to our severance calculator, which of course you can find at pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. All right, so let's plug that information in. This person, after 32 years in a sales role and at the age of 71 was let go, was offered 26 weeks pay. You see on your screen, the right amount is 24 months of severance, 2 years, okay? Not 26 weeks, which is 6 months, so 4 times that. That's why it's so important to go to pocketemploymentlawyer.ca, use our severance calculator so that you don't lose out on legal rights you have.
Right there, Lior Samfiru, co-founding partner at EmploymentLawyer.ca. Let's take a short break. When we come back, fired or resigned, your word against theirs. We're going to tackle that. Stick around.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Okay, welcome back. I'll tell you right away how to reach Lior Samfiru, employment lawyer, anytime, 1-888-861-4555. Email, if you prefer, ask@EmploymentLawyer.ca. They also host a live stream. Lior and a member of his colleagues as well. That's happening on YouTube and Facebook. You want to take part, simply go to stlawyers.ca, and you may be on the show sometime as well. Let's get to a question from the live stream. Lior, it goes like this. Says, my employer fired me last week, but now he's saying that I resigned and refuses to pay severance. Now I can't even get employment insurance. What should I do?
So, John, in most cases, when you're let go, when your employment is terminated, you're going to get a letter, something in hand that says, we are letting you go.
Right.
You use that when you apply to EI. We use that to make sure you get severance. What I don't like is situations where the company then denies, no, we didn't let you go. You just told us you've resigned. And because there's nothing in writing, it becomes your word against theirs. I don't like that situation. We try to avoid that. So what do you do if your employer calls you and tells you verbally that they're letting you go, or calls you to a meeting and it's all verbal? Well, as soon as you can, after the phone call or the meeting, you go and you send a text message or an email to your employer saying, confirming our discussion today where you told me my employment is terminated. You're confirming in writing, you're creating that record. Very, very important to do that. Now, if it's too late to do that, like in this situation, here's what you do. You tell your employer, well, wait, I understood that you let me go. I'm not resigning. So because there's this misunderstanding, no problem. I'm going to be in the office on Monday. We'll see you then. If the company doesn't let you do that, it becomes a termination at that point. But bottom line, you always want to have something in writing. You never want it to be a he said, she said type of a situation. And if you're not sure what to do or what to say, just call me.
Excellent. We're just about done for this week, Lior. Thank you so much. I'm John Scholes. You can catch his show every week, Wednesdays at 9:30, cp24.com/askalawyer. The radio show happens on News Talk 1010. That is Sundays at 1 p.m. And the phone call, always 1-888-861-4555, or you prefer an email, that is simply ask@employmentlawyer.ca. We'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in.